Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Isa Santos, and I am a librarian at Glendale Library Arts and Culture. My main duties are overseeing our makerspace, and so this year we're doing our Maker Fest. We're making our Maker Fest remotely, and it's a different approach that we're doing this year because of our current situation. But what's happening? Can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to welcome all of you to this new normal, I guess, the Maker Fest of 2021, which is completely remote. We're having a ton of workshops all month, and we are starting the month today with this Women in Tech panel. And we have Ani Torosyan, who is the founder of and CEO of DishDivvy. And then we have Edith Vosganians, she works at the library with technology. We also have Andrea Dominguez, who is a current student of electrical engineering. And we're going to be talking a lot about the start of a career in technology for women, as well as some of the challenges that we've all encountered in this. And I just wanted to also let you guys all know that everyone here is muted except the panelists, but you can send messages to the GLAC staff account. You should be able to see that account on the list of participants, and she will she'll let me know if you have any questions. We have allotted the last 15 minutes to ask for questions from the public, so feel free to send those over. And yeah, so I'm gonna get started. And the first question is just to get us started, which is, when did you decide you wanted to work with technology? And why did you decide to work in technology? And then we'll go from there. And I'll get that going with Ani. And
Sure. Yeah, hi everyone. Happy to be here. Just some quick background on me. I graduated from USC in 2004, so a while back, in biomedical and electrical engineering. So my background is in sort of the biomedical space, but fast forward to today, doing something very different, pretty much in consumer software. I have a food tech startup. It's called DishDivvy. We're headquartered here in Glendale. We started a couple of years ago, and it's essentially an online food platform that connects local home cooks and chefs, like right in your neighborhood, who are food safety certified and make amazing, delicious homemade food, so that you would get food directly from them. So the question is, like, why did you choose to get into tech? I think the short answer is, I don't know if it's a short answer, but I grew up in Silicon Valley. This is sort of right before the .com growth and how Silicon Valley became today. So in the 80s, grew up there, and my parents were both engineers. My brother ended up being an engineer, and so I really loved medicine. I knew I didn't want to go the traditional medical school route, but sort of combined the two, where I took medicine and engineering, and bam, you have biomedical engineering, and it was kind of an emerging field at the time. USC was really front running and like having like a dedicated school to that, so that discipline was really being grown on the campus over there. So that's basically, I would say, at heart, I love creating things. I think anyone who gets into technology loves innovation. And so if that's something that is interesting to you and you want to get into technology or biotech, definitely like being someone who's innovative and like wanting to be on the cutting edge of things is definitely a driving factor of like why I got into the field.
great. Edith, do you want to take it?
The last thing that Ani just mentioned, having the creativity, is what was the final push for me. When I was younger, about like 12, 13, my parents we got the first home computer back then. And it was just like this heavy, clunky, took up a huge amount of unnecessary space, but just playing with it, I realized that I can do so much. Anything I wanted to create, anything I wanted to do, I could do by just, clicking a couple of things and typing just a few lines. And that's where my curiosity stemmed from, really. As I went through high school, I knew that I wanted to build a career and go through my advanced education with something regarding science. And computer science was the best option for me as I went through the community college and explored all my options. And I just stuck with it. A little bit of personal info, I just graduated in May, and for my bachelor's degree from Cal State LA in computer science. And, I love it here. I love everything I do now. I have learned, and looking forward to seeing where things go for me on the tech side.
Andrea?
So when I was in high school and thinking about what I wanted to major in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but by some chance, I ended up applying to this high school summer research program at UCLA before my senior year of high school. And I was placed in a chemical engineering lab doing research. And I thought, like, this is so much fun. Like, I just want to be like a lab rat and like tinker in the lab and play with chemicals and have my lab coat and my little goggles and my notebook. And I just thought, like, I wanted to study chemistry. And when I went to UC Davis, that's what I started studying, chemical engineering. And about a year into it, I realized I didn't want to be a chemist. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. I knew that probably since 10th grade, no, maybe even 8th grade or so, I really became an environmentalist. And I was really passionate about trying to stop the effects of global warming. And so I knew that I wanted my career to be something in that world, something that was making a change for the better, helping us progress. And I knew that I thought that EVs were cool, and I probably wanted to help build EVs. And I thought that as a chemist, I could build batteries. And I always told people I was going to make batteries. But when I decided I didn't want to do chemical engineering, I knew I still wanted to stay somewhere in that EV world. So I tried to do some research of what other fields I could go into. I thought, I know I want to work with EVs. When you think about EVs, everyone thinks of Tesla. So I went onto their career page and I looked up their current job openings, and all of the positions were either for a mechanical engineer or an electrical engineer. And I was like, I don't think I want to do mechanical. I'm going to do electrical. And I honestly never really saw myself as an electrical engineer. Like, I had never really tinkered with things. I never really played with my computer as a kid. I never like took things apart and put them back together. But I started playing around with those things, LEDs and Arduinos and the makerspace. And I realized that I really do have a passion for combining art and technology. And that's kind of like when I realized that this is really something that I want to pursue. And now 2 years into my internship, whereas I work as a validation engineer, I definitely still love the EV field, and I'm really happy to be working in it. And I'll pass it back to you, Isis.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Okay, so from here, we're going to go to what has been the biggest challenge for you so far when it comes to developing your career? And I'll let Ani start with that.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me specifically, I haven't had a traditional career in any sense of that word. I think as an entrepreneur, when you kind of have that self-realization that you are an entrepreneur, you realize that your path is going to be very zigzaggy and windy, and that's very normal to you, but it's not normal to everyone else. So I would say almost 4 years into the corporate world after graduating college, I quit my job. I had a great job. So I started out as a R&D engineer at Medtronic, which is a really big med device company, and their diabetes division is in Northridge. It's like right next to CSUN. So that's where I was working from, and decided just to, quit my job. I was a product manager there, and walk away because I wanted to start things from the ground up and build my own business. And I did that, and I sold that business, and then I did something else, and then I did something else. And, everything seemed really cohesive to, like, it made a lot of sense why I'm jumping from this to that and learning so much in between. But like people like my mom who are watching me give up this great corporate job or, you know, stability or whatnot, were always, I think till this day, think, you know, I make these crazy decisions. But I think that's where like my challenge is, you know, I want to innovate and learn and do all these things, but every time you're trying to evolve, you hit some sort of wall or ceiling. And there's that challenge of like, okay, you know, do I just celebrate the successes and the wins that I've had? Or, you know, I get really down on myself of like, no, but I haven't achieved A or X or whatever. And that becomes like this, you know, difficult thing to get over. And what I learned from a business coach once is, you know, you really have to learn the art of appreciation, of sort of appreciating your wins versus just looking at what you have not accomplished. And I think as women, we do that a lot. We don't really take time to look at everything that we've accomplished and all the hard work that we've put in. Whereas we look at, oh my gosh, I haven't done this, or I didn't achieve that, or someone else is doing this and I haven't gotten to that point. So I think that's like a challenge of just sort of my own self challenge of, you know, stopping to enjoy the moment and then, you know, moving forward, because when we don't do that, we get burned out. And clearly in startup world, burnout is like a daily occurrence, but I would say like myself is my own challenge, if that makes any sense to anybody.
That was great. I agree with the whole thing about women not giving ourselves credit for doing things. You know? We just always think we can do better, but we don't really appreciate what we've already.
Yeah, we look at what's next and not appreciating what's now.
Yeah. And so Edith, you're starting your career, you graduated last year. How's that going?
Yeah, as far as, you know, starting my career, yeah, my biggest challenge was to even have a career at this point. My last few months of senior year, we went remote. Just one day we were on campus. Next, they're like, nope, no more in campus, no more lab, no more anything. Go home and work virtually. No, my senior year project, we were literally working on a Baja vehicle, building, installing sensors, running the engine. We had to see everything. They're like, oh no, just do it online. And we didn't, but I graduated anyway. And with this whole pandemic season happening, everything went on a hiring freeze. I had like an internship almost lined up for summer. Nope, canceled, we're done. All the applications I had sent through, sorry, we're not hiring due to, you know, the pandemic. And that was the biggest challenge that I was facing at the time. You know, just countless application after application, rejection after rejection. And it was not fun, not gonna lie, it was not fun. And then there's a little self-harm session when you log into LinkedIn and you see all these posts of, oh, I got an internship at JPL, I got an internship on Microsoft, and I'm just like sitting on my couch in my PJs and a cup of hot chocolate. But you know, it's over, thankfully. But I am very, very, very grateful and pleased to announce that as of Monday, I am working as the librarian specialist technology services for my very own Glendale Public Library, which have been working out since 2014 as a part-timer student worker. And I can finally say I am ready to stop searching and start growing, also unsubscribing from all the job mailing lists. But no, my biggest challenge was to even for a career is just to start a career, because I know these days it's very hard for students who just graduated, all those hardworking people who were laid off, just even finding forget career, job at this point is very difficult. And for me, that was the biggest challenge that I was able to accomplish very recently. So I've been very, very happy about that development on that end.
That's great. Andrea?
I think for myself, like Ani, I think I also have been my biggest challenge. I definitely agree that as women, we do kind of tend to like not focus on how far we've come and kind of focus on like where we've been. Like I mentioned, I started at UC Davis and I took a year off. And then I started going back to school part-time. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't believe that I could be in tech. Like I didn't want to take physics because I was so nervous about not doing well. I was really scared of taking computer science classes. But there's so many people in my career and in my support system that really encouraged me to go for those things. And they kept telling me, I kept having people tell me, like, you're smart, you need to do this, you should go for it. Like, stop doubting yourself. And I'm really thankful to have those people in my life because the first computer science class that I took, I absolutely loved it. And I was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. Especially when I started working on my own projects, I definitely realized that it's really something that I love doing. But I did, and I still do struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, feeling like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not where other people should be. I don't have all of this experience, or I didn't play around with this, or I didn't do that, or I don't know how this one programming language, or whatever it might be. Constantly always worrying about not fitting in or not being good enough for whatever space that you've occupied, and kind of learning that like it's okay, I'm allowed to take up space, I belong here, and I'm good enough to do those things and more.
I think something I'll just add on that, and Andrea, take it as you will as advice or not. When I first went to my first corporate job out of college, and I was sitting in this meeting with some higher up managers, and everyone was using acronyms and referencing things I had no idea, and like everything was SOP, and this is like everything was an acronym. And I came home and I remember my now husband, but my then boyfriend was like, am I just stupid? Like, why am I not understanding what these people are talking about? And I just felt so dumb, for lack of a better word. And then you get experience under your belt, you learn things, you meet people, you evolve. And then I think years and years later, after you've had experiences, you kind of gain that confidence where, if you don't know something, you speak up and say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. Like, could you explain that to me? Or, and I think a lot of that just comes with, you build confidence from experience and maturity in the workplace. But I remember vividly, like the first day at my job, I just came home and I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm not good enough. Everyone's so much smarter than me. And that's I think something that women do more to themselves than not necessarily a man might have a different, how they react to that might be a little bit differently. So I think that's really interesting that you touched upon that in your own experience too.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I totally know about like going in on your first day and like hearing all of these different acronyms. I remember my first day at my internship, I had my little notebook, and on the first page, I wrote down every single acronym and went home and looked them up. And I was like, I have to know what these men are talking about.
Yeah. And I didn't have, not much of like Google and YouTube back then. So now I feel like there's so many different outlets in learning these things, which is great. I mean, the democratization of knowledge right now is fantastic.
Yeah, and that actually brings us to a really good point that I wanted to talk to you about that kind of stuff. Do you think like the fact that primarily in the tech world, it's like a very male heavy world, right? Do you think that and the fact that we have like family and culture and all of those things impact how we decide on going into that field? Like I struggled with that myself, and being like very techie, and like everyone's like, oh, like you're just a girl, like, and I really doubted myself. Like I loved biology in high school and I never pursued it because I was like, I don't want to go into STEM. That's a thing for boys, like that kind of pressure that we feel. And when you go into tech and you work primarily with men, And then you have your family and you have a culture, all those factors. How do you see that affecting your decision, and how do you think that affects other women in deciding to go into that field? Like how impactful and like problematic in a certain way, how that worked for you, and how do you see that affecting you and the other women's careers? And Ani, I think you can take that to start with.
Sure. I mean, I think I'll speak personally from my own experience and then what I've maybe observed throughout the years. So like I said, I grew up in San Jose, so in Silicon Valley. My mom was an engineer, is an engineer. She's retired now, but you know, so I was born in Iran. I'm Armenian born in Iran, and my mom, when she was 18, left Iran, which was like unheard of, to go to England to school and like learned engineering, got her bachelor's degree. And I think she was like the only woman in her engineering class. And then, you know, we left Iran as refugees, came to the United States. First came to LA, in fact, but my parents this was in the 80s, realized there really wasn't like economic opportunity for them here at that time. And my uncle was in San Jose, and sort of Silicon Valley was just emerging. Companies were just starting out there, and my family moved over there, and it ended up being like a really good move. Especially they were, you know, in the field of engineering. So I saw my mom like build her career and hustle. And I remember in 2000, like when I was going to school, she was earning a 6-figure income. So, you know, I saw that happen. At the same time, you know, my dad was very empowering. Like he would say, like, if so-and-so can do it, you can do it. You know, there was no limitations put on me as a sort of, I have a brother, like my brother and I, like we had the same expectations of us, no less, no more. So for me, I mean, I was blind, like I never had, like I wasn't exposed to sort of that limitations growing up. I think when I went to engineering school, like I realized at USC, like there wasn't a lot of girls in my class. I still wasn't that aware of, hey, you know, you're kind of like the minority here. And what I'll say is like when I went into the corporate world, I had a lot of male managers and directors and even some executives who were great mentors to me. One of them gave me like a huge like jumping off point in my career, and I'll never forget that. So, you know, I think kind of what I'm trying to say is my lens of what I always looked towards the industry was like, oh, I can do it. If someone else can do it, I can do it, whatever. But the unfortunate thing is most girls growing up don't have that kind of environment, and they don't have those kind of mentors, or maybe their parents aren't equipped well enough to give them that guidance. So I think that's where, as a society, we need to do a much better job in making sure these girls who then grow up into women, you know that they don't have these limitations and they can do whatever, you know, they put their mind to. And, you know, seeing things like, I forget her name, but the mission control person, you know, who got the Mars rover, she was all over the media, like seeing people in those roles now. I mean, it's amazing, you know, and I have 2 daughters, and the number one thing I focus on them now is making sure that they have the utmost confidence in everything that they try to achieve, because that's, you know, that strength is going to get them through a lot of those barriers that they're going to encounter.
That's wonderful that you had that kind of encouragement at home. That's kind of amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Edith?
Yeah, my story kind of aligns sort of the same way as Ani's. I'm an immigrant myself. My family and I moved from Iran in 2007, and the main reason was, well, for my parents were trying to provide a better future for me, essentially, because I only had a couple of options. It was secretary or stay-at-home mom at that point back in Iran. So I could pick either of those 2. Wow. But no, my parents wanted a better future for me, which is why we moved. And I kind of didn't have any limitations at home. My grandma was saying, oh, you're going to be a doctor when you grow up. You're going to take care of your grandma, when I was like 5. So they always had, not my family had always had a bright plan in their minds for me. And I was a straight A student all throughout high school, even middle school, even younger. So there wasn't any limitations of, no, you're going to stay home, you're going to do X, Y, Z. And my only limitations I had was at that point, if I wanted to personally choose to be a doctor or an engineer, I had to pick either one. But the first wall of hesitancy that I hit was walking into my computer classes. Walking into biology, it was fine, mixed crowd. Walking to English, again, mixed crowd, which is fine also as well. But when I walked into my computer science classes, you could see the divide. For example, in a room of 40 students, there was 3 girls max, myself included. In a lecture hall full of students, it was me and the girl next to me, and one in the other corner, but it was too much of a distance to speak to. So that kind of inequality does really train on a person. It did for me. For example, I walk in, when I transferred colleges from Glendale Community College to Cal State LA, the first semester I was about to drop the class and change majors, because I walk in a class, all the guys are talking to each other, friends, they've already been through this, they know the professor, they are in a routine. And here I am sitting in a black at a class, kind of isolated. I mean, I could know the subject like the back of my hand, but not feeling welcome in a course that I signed up for was very discouraging, completely discouraging. And it took a lot of speaking with my parents, talking through all my insecurities, all my fears, then they helped me realize, I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me. My only concern is my business, my education, and the relationship I have with the professor, which is kind of true. And, they convinced me to not change my major, thankfully, and just stick through it and work through it. One of my greatest influencers in this whole course that I had was my first computer science professor, Professor Christina Schroyer. She was my first exposure to this whole world. I took CS 101 with her, and it was a complete and utter joy to see a woman teaching a course to a classroom full of males and me and the girl next to me. And it was just so empowering. Like, okay, and I keep thinking back on her, even though it's been 7 years since I took the class, and then I think of it fondly, that it doesn't matter at this point. It's easy now. Hindsight is 2020. It's easy now for me to say, oh, it doesn't matter, just go do your work. But at that point, it's hard. It's hard to convince yourself to go through the class. It's hard to convince yourself to just, sit through another lecture, just do what you're doing and not pay attention to your surroundings. But, that's what I'm trying to do, trying to make aware at this point, to create some sort of representation for other girls to see, like, oh, hey, look, there's another girl running this tech services tech department. Look, there's another girl going to space, doing something amazing. And this type of representation is what encouraged me to go through it, and I'm hoping it'll encourage other young girls to pursue this type of a career.
Andrea?
I also, like the other 2 panelists, had a lot of encouragement from home to pursue STEM. I think my mom was always like, I want you to do whatever you want to do as long as you're happy. And my dad was like, no, you're going to go into STEM. Like, you're going to become a doctor or engineer. Like, I want you to walk around and introduce yourself as Dr. Dominguez. Like, you're definitely going to pursue STEM. And he always loved watching Nova and like science documentaries, and like it was such a passion of his that he kind of like pushed that onto me, just kind of rubbed off on me, that curiosity of like that knowledge and like wanting to learn how things work. Definitely came from my dad. So I definitely had a really strong support system at home. Going into like in the academic setting, yeah, it's kind of hard not to notice that you're like one of the only girls in your class. I actually also had Professor Schroyer at GCC too, and she's honestly like the best. She really is. And I think, it really speaks to that fact that like how important representation is. Like, I also agree that it is so cool to have a woman like teaching and leading a whole group of men. being like, yeah, I belong here because the professor is also a woman. So like, I'm here. I think like that was also super important. I think even now, like in our labs, like gender is like such a big issue, gender and pronouns in like an academic setting. And you can kind of see that trickling into the engineering classes also. But it's kind of hard, like when all of the professors are men and they're used to being around all men. I know like a lot of times my professor just refers to everyone like as a guy, like, okay, the hardware guy, the software guy, this guy, that guy, one person's going to do this and the other guy's going to do that. So every now and then I'm like, or girl, just to be like, hey, we're here. But no, and I think at my internship, I was also like the only female engineer in my team. A few months after I started, we hired another female engineer. So I wasn't the only one, but I've just had such a really good positive experience at Greenlots where I feel like all of my male supervisors and mentors have been really great and supportive.
That's great. We all had some kind of really good, empowering and great mentors. I've always always had like amazing bosses who worked with me, like with technology and stuff. So it's great to have that throughout your career. It really helps with keep going. Um, but on the other hand, do you have a question that actually relates to another one of the attendants actually sent a question that relates to what I had. Have you experienced a story like have you experienced like some blatant, very sexist moments? Maybe one that you didn't even think was sexist at the moment, and then you're like, wait, that was yeah. Um, have you experienced something like that? And like, could you share one of those with us? And Ani, if you want to get that going.
Yeah, I could share a couple. Like, I don't think I experienced anything like that until I got into like founding my own startup. So one specific one, and I wouldn't say it was like a big deal. I just kind of realized afterwards, like, hey, that wasn't okay. When I was raising money, our angel round, and had a meeting with a potential angel investor that one of our current angel investors introduced me to. So went and had this meeting, and so we're a platform where we connect these home cooks with nearby neighbors, and a lot of our clientele are busy parents because they're busy working professionals and they don't have time to cook food, and they want something that's nutritious, and they get a homemade meal from our platform. So this angel investor, after the whole pitch and stuff, looks at me and says, well, do you have children? And I said, yeah, I'm a mom, my kids are ages X and Y. And then he looks at me and says, how do you expect to grow a company to profitable status while being a mom? And I explained to him, like, that gives me a lot of insight into our main clientele because they are also working busy parents. And I understand sort of the consumer psychology of the demographic that we're targeting. And so I kind of like defended the question, as opposed to when I walked out of the meeting and I thought about it, I'm like, that was kind of a jerk comment. Like, I should have thrown that back and said, do you have any children? Which I think he was a parent. Like, how are you running this as a father? And I asked my husband when I got home, I'm like, has that question ever been asked of? And he is a pretty top position in a leading biopharmaceutical company. And through all his years of like interviews or interviewing other people, I'm like, has that question ever come up of like, are you able to do this job because you're a dad? And of course, it's never come up, but we think about it. If you're a mom, you have barriers, but if you're a dad, no, it's fine because your wife or the mom is going to do everything anyways. So I think that was kind of a moment where I'm like, yeah, I'm glad that guy didn't invest because I didn't want him to be on my investor list. And then the other one was, again, another angel investor, very top profile kind of person. Had a couple of lunch meetings, and then by the second or third lunch meeting, I realized the lunches were not really to get me there to talk about the investment. it seemed very awkward by like lunch number 2 or lunch number, I think we did 2 lunches, and that was just like very off-putting.
Yeah, wow, the whole mom thing, it's the thing, right?
Yeah,
how
and I
that can
think
you, yeah.
I think when we talk about the Me Too movement, it's not necessarily just someone inappropriately grabbing something or someone, you know, there's a lot of subtle ways that this happens in the workplace. And I think, you know, for the other panelists who are young in their career, you know, really being in tune with the subtleties and how it trickles into these sort of indirect ways. Because a lot of times we think has to be some like super inappropriate physical thing that happens to qualify as like this Me Too movement. But no, it's not. There's a lot of subtle things that happen on a daily basis that are just not okay.
Adit, do you want to?
I've been on the lucky end to not have experienced any direct upscale encounter of any variety when it comes to like sexism and whatnot, but I have experienced the aura of a room full of males versus me that can create some type of a feeling. For example, I'm going to mention college again because that's what I can fall on based on my recent experience. Is I personally am kind of shy until I find my footing in a class or in a setting, and then I'm very vocal. I ask questions. I'm comfortable with my settings until I create this safe space for me. But then when I look at my peers, my classroom peers who happen to be male at that point, very comfortable to just first day in class, walk in, take up space, start asking, start talking. And I've seen this, it could be a one-off, would be a very confident individual, but I have seen a pattern throughout the years of this happening where they can, when it's very comfortable, it's a very open space for an individual to just walk in and take over, feel comfortable, raise their voice and start talking. But then for me, it's kind of difficult. Again, I come back to this whole imposter syndrome, like, oh, okay, I just got here. Am I supposed to be here? Let me figure out the setting that I'm in. Am I allowed to ask a question? Am I allowed to make a comment on this? And just, I don't think it's more of a personal thing, it's more of like a systemic thing, because this space that I'm going is male dominated, and it's having the courage to ask a question could backfire on me. And oh, I just remembered it actually did once when I was questioned because of the question that I asked. I don't know if that makes sense, but and oh, why would you think something like that? Why are you asking this? As if I'm not allowed to think critically. I'm sorry, but that's what I've been, my experience on that end. So just, I feel like creating this safe space for everybody versus than just the one individual group is important, especially now.
Andrea?
I think sometimes, yeah, in school, like I've met some of my male colleagues will just kind of say like off remarks where you're like, you just kind of sit there and look like, you realize like I'm a woman, right? Like, why would you say that to me? In the workplace, I've actually been really fortunate that even though like most of the people that I interact with have been men or are men, everyone has been really, really respectful, super helpful, always like encourage me to ask questions. Definitely my supervisor, if he's talking, I have no problem like cutting him off mid-sentence and being like, wait, back up. What did you just say? Or let me write that down. Or can you clarify? Like, what are you talking about? Or even like question some of the things that he's doing. Like he and a lot of our supervisors actually really encourage that for us to ask questions and to make sure that, you know, we come up with the best possible product for our team. The only sort of unfortunate experience that I did have was with one of the new hires at our company. He kind of made an sort of off remark to me that made me feel a little uncomfortable. And I think this was the first time that I was working with him, and we happened to be alone. And it just kind of made me question, like, would he say that to me if there was another man in the room? So it just kind of like kept in the back of my head. I didn't really say anything. Wasn't until later on he made another comment with my female colleague present also, and again with no other males present. And again made me wonder, like, would he say that if there was another man like in the room, or is he only saying those things like when it's just us in the room? And I actually asked around some of my male colleagues from school, like, hey, you know, this happened to me. Like, I kind of feel weird about it. I don't know if I should report it. It is a little uncomfortable, and I don't think it's appropriate. And one of my good friends, he told me, he's like, yeah, I definitely think you should report it. Like, I don't think that someone should be making those comments to you in the first place, especially in a professional setting. And if you're uncomfortable, like, that alone should be enough of a reason to report it to HR. So I did actually have to file a complaint for sort of like that sexual harassment incident. And my boss was super supportive throughout the whole situation and really made me feel like so appreciative of the fact that I did have someone who, one, believed me and took it seriously. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so on that note, do you have any advice for someone considering, like, now, if they're considering to pursue a career in tech? And we talked about all these issues, but like, do you have any advice for them, or do you? And also, how do you think that we can help each other as women and growing our careers and support each other on this path? So that's a two-part question, I guess.
Yeah, I think for anyone who's interested in tech, kind of just do it and go for it. There's a lot of resources out there. I think you don't have to really just think anymore about traditional four-year university. That, I mean, we clearly know now that that's not necessarily the best path for everybody. There's a lot of amazing like programming schools that if you want to become a programmer, you can put like 1 year even or 2 years, like General Assembly or some of these other places where you get very hands-on industry specific training, and then you come out pretty much being like ready to go into programming, or you know, these other vocational schools or things like that. So I would definitely recommend that. Like I said, information now is democratized and knowledge is democratized. There's so many online resources. Like Udemy is fantastic. Like if you want to just get your feet wet and want to learn something like intro to programming or intro to graphic design, or learning about any topic. So I would say just do it, just get started in some path. And then, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Oh, how can we help each other, support each other?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I think one way we can support each other is being able to mentor one another. So, you know, if you have that opportunity to help someone in your workplace, or to lend an extra hand, or to teach them something, I think when I was, you know, learning a lot in my corporate job, I think I was just naturally curious. I would go bother everyone and ask them so many questions all the time. But also those people who really helped mentor me, like they readily gave that information and they readily supported me with like, you know, educating me on different topics. And that's stuck with me for so many years. So I think that camaraderie that we can do, and not just women to women, like, you know, if you're a female, provide that mentorship to another male starting out in their career. How amazing is that? Kind of circling back into that story of the female professor teaching the male students. Why not carry that forward and do that in the workplace? So I'm a big proponent of community building, and I think we definitely need to do that in the women in tech atmosphere as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, Ani already covered of the topic of just doing it, because that was one of the advice that I had, because there's so many resources. Even YouTube is a huge resource. There's a lot of tutorial, hours and hours long tutorial you can download and start on your own. And besides that, I like to mention having a good support system, because this journey is hard when you're on your own. Starting anything on your own is hard. So if you're, unfortunately, there are some people out there whose parents are not so supportive, who do not encourage your dream, that's fine. Find a support group in your friends, find a support group in your cousins, find a support group online, whether it be through some online social media, LinkedIn, the Twitch chat, Facebook group, something, anywhere. Find like-minded individuals who will support you and push you to pursue your dreams, because along the way you will find yourself supporting them back, and then it creates this like ongoing powerful cycle of everybody urging each other going forward. And I've been super blessed to have a group like that in school, work, and home, which have been a huge help in encouraging me to get to where I am right now. And one more thing is mentoring. As Ani mentioned, it's a huge, huge, huge help in any of the place. At work, I've been blessed to have amazing managers, supervisors, mentors who have helped educate me, teach me the ways that everything is done, so that I can take that, apply it to my work settings, and to apply it to whatever I'm doing at the moment. I've been blessed to have a mentor through the support group that I college and joined, and he has been helping going through interviews with me, having resume checks with me to get this fear of public speaking out of my system. And again, has been huge. Without him, I would not be doing this right now. And so having that support system and having that mentoring opportunity has been great. Now, I've always been on the mentored side, but because I've been on that end a lot recently, I have taken a great appreciation in having on the receiving end of such help. So I will take it upon myself to be the mentee in the future, like the mentor, doing the mentoring in the future, and trying to instill what I've learned, what I've gathered into the next generation.
Andrea?
Yeah, I definitely agree with my other two panelists. Like, definitely just go for it. Having a support system, someone that you can come home to and be like, is going to really help you, encourage you, push you, because like any career, you're going to have difficult moments of self-doubt. You really need to make sure that you have that support system wherever it may be. And I think that my other advice would be really to do the research. Like, if you feel like you're interested in tech, but you don't know what you want to do, or if you don't see yourself in like traditional tech roles, really like go out there and do the research of like, okay, what are people doing in tech? Like, it's not just someone sitting at their laptop programming all day. Like, definitely that's one aspect of tech. And if you like that part, I definitely enjoy when I get to just program all day. But there's so many other things that you could do in that field. You could go into tech and technology, bringing technology into the classroom. You could work in a maker space. You can work with 3D printers. I mean, there's so much you could do with technology. I think that it's really hard to find any industry that is not affected by technology. We live in such a tech world. Our world is completely immersed with tech. I mean, you don't do anything without your phone or your computer, really. So technology is everywhere, and you can definitely find a career within tech that you might like, and it might be outside of those traditional tech roles, but those jobs, I guarantee you, are out there. Definitely, you just have to do the work of finding it. And if you don't find it, then you can make your own business, find your own role, create your own niche. But yeah, definitely do research. Like if you don't see someone doing it out there, there probably is someone, but if you don't see someone doing it, then you could be that someone doing that, you know, definitely go for it.
That was great. I'm going to move on to some participants' questions that we got. One of them is, do you ever feel like you don't have a seat at the table when you're sitting right there? And I don't know if anyone wants to take it first. So Ani, if you...
I think my answer is yes and no. I think just because personally, like I said, with my upbringing, I have this like probably overinflated sense of like confidence that my parents have instilled of like, yeah, you can do it. But you know, for example, like raising money for our startup, you know, we had a competitor who came into the space a year later, two non-tech male founders. I'm a tech founder, my co-founder is tech founder. They've been able to raise like 15x more money than we have. And probably talk to same venture groups that we've talked to. And, you know, I rarely ever play the it's because I'm a woman card. I just don't like to go down that path. But, you know, in the sphere of what we're talking about right now, I think when we look at the data, you know, it's just crazy how much less women founders are funded when compared to male founders. And then you look at the flip side of that transaction where women founded companies that were funded on a dollar for dollar basis return much more return on investment to those invested dollars versus, you know, the male founded companies. So when you're looking at data, it's hard to say that there isn't this disparity. There clearly is. And, you know, I see it, but I just don't let those things like bring me down too much of like, oh, it's impossible. The machine is against me, you know, this and that. Especially now we're living in an age where we're seeing a lot of improvement in this area. And the more we talk about these things, of course, the more advocacy is brought into these issues. So yeah, my question is yes and no. And I take things on like a case by case basis. I hate to make blatant statements of like, yes, of course, you know, women are being shunned out of every discussion or whatnot. It's not like that. I think there's a lot of great men out there that are giving women platforms and opportunities, and we need to commend them. My husband is like my number one like cheerleader, and you know, we're such a team and trying to build a startup and having two kids and him having a busy job, and you know, it's really hard. And so it really does take a team, and you know, I commend the men in my life who've really propped me up. So my answer is just yes and no. You know, every case is different.
May I jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I first saw that question, I took it, I personally have thought of something like that, but it was a case of imposter syndrome and still living through it, still working through it. And, you know, but here's a thought that I have on it. There must, yes, you don't feel like you have a seat, but yet you're sitting at the table. You got the promotion, you got the job, you got the opportunity, you're in the meeting. So if you personally don't believe you're there, there are others who do believe that you deserve that right. You deserve that spot, that seat, that meal, that plate that you've been given. And, you know, just take it. Just take it. And if you're not confident that you can do it, fake it till you make it. Just gotta keep chugging and keep going. And if you have a question, Google probably has the answer to that. Trust me, it probably does. You just gotta fine tune your search results.
Or a glass of wine has the answer to that. Just had to throw that in there. Sorry, Eddie, go ahead.
Go for it. But yeah, you just whenever that sense of like, oh, am I the right choice? There must have been a mistake. Do I deserve this? Can I do this? You know, there must have been better candidates, somebody out there who's better than me. There might be, maybe, there probably is, but this is you right now. It's your seat. You're sitting, and fight for it for tooth and nail. Raise your voice. Again, fake it till you make it. And then one day you'll be sitting like, okay, yeah, I'm good. What's next?
I think speaking from my personal experience, I think working at a small company, I feel like the table is a lot smaller. So you definitely feel like you do have more of a voice. I really work closely with my direct supervisor, and really the team is just him and I, and my other coworker who's actually been working on a different team since we've went remote. So it's really just him and I. And I think that I've almost never really felt like an intern at my company. Like I always felt like whatever I had to say carried the same weight as any of the other men at the table. And I think that that's really thanks to my supervisor and my boss, who really have encouraged that, who've always constantly asked for feedback, like have like really been made it a point, like stop me if you have questions. What do you think on this? Give me your feedback on that. And I feel like my supervisor has a lot of confidence and trust in me. Then he'll give me tasks and he'll be like, I know you'll figure it out. Like, you just keep working on it, or I trust you with this. Like, I know you can do this. And he puts me in positions where sometimes I have to lead meetings. Oftentimes I get to demo the work that I am doing, or I have to speak directly with the manufacturers that we're working with. So I think that I've been so fortunate to work in an environment that really makes me feel welcomed and feel like I definitely do have a seat at the table.
That's great. So to close up, and I know you all mentioned like just do it and go for it. Do you have any advice as in like how to find a mentor, how to find the job openings? It's very difficult sometimes to navigate all the like LinkedIn, and you have all these things and you have so many different job titles, like you mentioned, Andrea. Like there's all these wealth of jobs out there. At the same time, there isn't. It's very hard to navigate all that world. Um, how do you have any advice on how to navigate that, how to find a mentor, how to get started and actually go for it? And you mentioned taking classes, and you've all mentioned a lot of things that people can do. But if they're trying to either change their careers, or if they're just getting started out of high school, or they're just out of college, how do they find a mentor? How do they apply for a job? Like, do you have any like golden advice that you want to share? And I think that would be our last question. So I would just quick advice, if you guys have some, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think just to start that off, I think if you're just getting into the field, or you're switching and you want to get into like a part of tech that maybe you don't have experience in, and I know this is kind of taboo to say, and like I've been on women panels where there's difference of opinion on this, but sometimes you have to do something for free or underpaid to like get your foot in the door, right? I've done a lot of free work as far as like, hey, I'll do this project in my own time because I just want to gobble up and like learn this new skill set. Or hey, what I would like over the course of the last 20 years, like I learned how to do a lot of digital graphics and Photoshop, and then eventually UI UX design. So like, when I had the idea for my app, I had the skill set that I built to do all the designs for the app, right? And that's because I would come home from work and like stay up until like 4 a.m. trying to figure this stuff out on my own time, so that when I went back into work, I could contribute to this project in other ways and then prove myself, right? And that caught the attention of a lot of different managers or executives, who then became my mentors and gave me other pathways. So I think like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to put in extra sweat equity so that you can, learn these things on your own time, or time that's not paid. And then also don't be afraid to just ask people straight out. You'd be surprised how generous people are. Hey, I really appreciate the way you handle X, Y, and Z. And I really love the way that you do, your job. Would you mind mentoring me for an hour a week? And then and I think that you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to do that.
Adi?
I'll contribute to this on the application end because I went through a lot of those. Just it's very daunting opening up, Indeed or LinkedIn, the career page, and you're searching for and see a list and rows and endless selection on that. And I'm going to try to explain the piece of advice that my mentor gave me, which helped me a lot in managing my anxiety when it comes to job applications, is just do one. Just do one. Just do one a day. You got 30 minutes before you got to go run errands, go to grocery shopping. Just shoot it up, run it up, and run along. Shoot it, go. You got 5 minutes before, no, not 5 minutes is not enough time. For example, you got 20 minutes before you got to start dinner. Just do it, type it, get it in. And also, tailor your resume. Find keywords, key phrases, even if you're just copy pasting select job description into your resume. Make sure you tailor it to every job because it does help. Now, I don't mean lie. Just find things that you have accomplished, you have learned, you have done in the description, and put it in your resume because it is a huge help. That the first few rejections are not going to be easy, but after a while, like, oh, another rejection email. Okay, great. I'll apply to some more tonight. One of those will stick eventually.
I think that definitely like ask people around, ask how they got started in their career, ask about more information about their work. People often really do like to talk about themselves and what they're doing and how they're doing it. I mean, that's what we're here doing. I think one of the things that helped me early on when I was still undecisive about where I wanted to go exactly with my career path, if I wanted to stay in engineering at all, someone suggested to me that I interview an engineer. And I happened to work at an elementary school where one of the TAs, his brother was actually an electrical engineer, and he worked at EV battery company, which is actually exactly one of the things that I wanted to do. And I said, hey, do you think that your brother would mind if I interviewed him? So he set up this appointment for me to go out to his office in Simi Valley and get to tour his workplace and ask questions about what he's doing and what his life is like or work life is like. And yeah, I think like that was one of the things where it's like, wasn't until I was really in that space where it was like, yeah, I can see myself doing something like this.
Great. Do you guys have any last thoughts, any last words that you want to share? And we're past 7:33 now. So does anyone have any last questions or any last thoughts that you want to share with us?
No, just thank you, Isas, for inviting me, and just for anyone who's watching, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to Isas to get, my contact information, or again, always willing to help and support other women.
Yeah, just echoing that, and thank you for coordinating this webinar. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I feel like seeing other women succeed and go on great adventures and do amazing things is just needed, just to see like, oh, I can do that too. Just a piece of representation is huge.
Okay, so we had a last question that just came in. I don't know if anyone has time to stick around and answer that last question, which is, what do you recommend to gain more experience other than traditional internships and shadowing? If you guys have time to answer that really quick, we can do that. Otherwise, we can follow up later. I can send emails to whoever asked the question. We can get that back to you.
Yeah, I actually have to run, but feel free to relay, any messages to me. That'd be fine.
Yeah, of course. So for everyone, if you have any other questions, feel free to email us at makerspace@glendaleca.gov, and I can forward that to the panelists. Also, check out the Maker Month website, and we'll have a ton of workshops throughout the whole month. And this is also part of Glendale Tech Week, which is a whole year-long celebration of tech. And there will be a lot more programs to Glendale Tech Week, which is used to be a week long. Now it's a whole year-long program. So feel free to catch up with us and send us any questions that you might have. Okay. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.